All right, welcome back to another night of basketball. I'm your host, Parker Ainsworth. I'm joined by Jamaal Simmons. Jamaal, how are we doing, man?
Hey, it's great to be back on the show. It's just great to be here again.
Good deal, good deal. So before the pod, we were talking off air about San Antonio and their playing game. You were saying you caught some of that one tonight?
I caught a little of it, but right before I left the house, and like we were talking earlier. It's just interesting to me how I expect Memphis to win the game, but at the same time, you don't know what to expect when you got Popovich on the other side.
It's never feels right to bet against Popovich, even if he's the 10 seed, right? Like that's just a weird aspect of Coach Pop. So we're going to break down a lot of the playing games tonight, and we're going to look at last night's pair of playing games, talk about some stuff that has to do with tonight's playing games. And moreover, I'm looking forward to hearing what you got to say about this idea that some of these have been, I don't know if duds is the right word, but it feels like there's been a few duds. And so I want to look at why those were yesterday. And to start that off, we're going to jump into our hot tea, cold brew segment like we always start with. Hot tea, cold brew is brought to you by Yeti Coolers, Cups, and Koozies. Yeti is the go-to shop for keeping things hot or cold, just like these NBA stories. Yeti's based out of Austin, Texas. Check out the links in our social media handles for all your insulated needs for tailgating, camping, and daily life. Yeti is built for the wild. Hot tea, cold brew is based on an idea like the hot tea from the old Kermit meme. Some of these potential stories are piping hot, and some have some kick to them. And some of them are ice cold, right? And they're just kind of like, I don't know if that's necessarily something worth bringing up yet. This Yeti cup, as I've got right here, Yeti cups can keep things hot for 6 to 8 hours and ice cold frozen for up to 24. And so let's see which of these stories are hot and cold. The first hot tea, cold brew question, Jamaal. Hot tea, cold brew. The play-in games on night one being blowouts meant they were duds. What do you think about that idea?
So I would probably say it's a little bit cold to me because we have to recognize exactly what's going on with the two games in their entirety. So the first one that came on, Indiana against Charlotte. Charlotte just didn't have one of their best players in Gordon Hayward, which I thought really would have helped as far as giving them another offensive weapon to use against Indiana. And then you have to also consider that Indiana didn't have Miles Turner by their own account. So I don't want to put too much stock into it. I think Indiana played exceptionally well. But then again, Charlotte is probably one of the younger teams in the NBA. So I kind of expected that kind of result. Not that many points, but the result. Then fast forward to Boston against Washington. We all know that Bradley Beal was nowhere near 100%, but he was still out there giving an effort. And I kind of want to go back to what Grant Hill and Marvin Albert were saying on the telecast for that game, was that Russell Westbrook just did not seem like he was himself for a good majority of that game. I don't know if it's a lingering injury or he just was not in a good headspace or whatever the case may be. But as he goes, Washington goes, and he didn't play well, and you saw the result. And, of course, when you have Jason Tatum scoring 50 points and going ballistic, they kind of give Celtics an edge. So yeah. I don't want to put too much stock into it. So it could be a litany of things. It could be injuries. It could be how much motivation each team has for the play-in. Because, as you know, whoever they play in the next round or whatnot, I mean, you're looking at Brooklyn, who's going to take on Boston. The winner of tomorrow's game between Indiana and Washington has to take on Philly. So it's not like you're going to get a real winners thing right there.
Well, and I think it's interesting too if we look at this idea of like, does it mean just because the games were not close last night, that doesn't necessarily mean this is a bad idea, right? Like, as we look at Russell Westbrook's season, he caught a lot of praise in February, March, and April for, like you said, carrying that team through Beal injuries, right? He did the triple-double thing again, and we could digress into looking at, like, does that make for winning basketball? But what I will say is in looking at that historic stat line, right, fourth time in 5 years he's done it, that's ridiculous. That doesn't feel worth anything if they, like, were the 8 seed and got swept by Philly, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if as the 8 seed, I don't know, if they beat Indiana tomorrow night, like, that gives him a potential moment that wasn't available before, because they're not going to beat you're not going to upset someone 4 times in a week, but they can beat Indiana tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
I do think that it's frustrating, and I want to hear what you think about this. I felt like with Miles Turner out the game, Sabonis was questionable, so I assume he wasn't 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like we're due for this big LaMelo moment, right? Rookie of the year potential, LaMelo coming in. He can't win a playoff series as a rookie. He's 19 years old, 18 years old, but could last night have been his moment? And that was more my disappointment. How about you?
I agree. I think it was a really good chance for him to really show what he could do on a national stage, and he came up short. But at the same time, he can use this as a learning experience, as the whole Charlotte team could use that, because as you look at the Eastern Conference right now, it's other than maybe 3-4 teams in the East, it's a wide open conference. So if, say, Charlotte comes back next year, LaMelo grows his game. You see PJ Washington and Miles Bridges, they came up and they really showed some great strides this year. I would not be surprised if you see Charlotte as a top 4 or 5 seed in the East.
Well, and there certainly could be teams fall apart, right? Does Boston blow it up? How long does Washington have left? I know that's toward the bottom of the playoff bracket, but Brooklyn's only got those guys into contract for 1 more year. If Philly doesn't work, do you eventually have to separate Simmons and be like lots of questions are there depending on who wins the whole conference, right? In the other game, it was a dud in the sense that it was not a close game, but we did get a historic performance from a guy in a Boston Celtics uniform, right? And like that never feels like a dud, regardless of it's Bill Russell 60 years ago or Jason Tatum last night. Like that will always carry some weight, right?
Always. And anytime you mention history in the Boston Celtics, those two entities are like hand in hand. So what I saw from Jason Tatum, I saw a guy who realized that without his running mate in Jaylen Brown, which I think will really cost them when they face Brooklyn, I think he really showed what he is truly capable of. Now, can he sustain it and get 4 wins against Brooklyn? That remains to be seen. But I think it really shows how far he's come as a player in his first 2 years.
Well, and it weirdly feels like the success I was anticipating out of LaMelo, right? So, like, I was thinking we could have this LaMelo Ball moment because he won't win a playoff series. The battered up, beaten up, bruised up Boston Celtics may not win a playoff series either, but we got a Jason Tatum moment, right? Like a valuable, meaningful Jason Tatum moment. And that might be worth it right there. If I'm going to jump into the next question, it jumps us over to the Western Conference. Tonight's games, again, the Grizzlies and Spurs are going at it on ESPN right now. It's a 4-point game as we speak. The Jazz will get the 8 seed after the play-in's done. The Suns will get the 7 seed in the play-in's done, which potentially the 7 seed will be the winner of tonight's game between the Golden State Warriors and the LA Lakers. The loser will then play the winner of this Spurs Grizzly game, and that team will play like the 8 seed, right? Mm-hmm. And so, hot tea, cold brew, the Jazz and Suns should get to pick their opponent in a way to not maybe have to play the Lakers. Like the way this playoff thing shakes out, they should get to pick who they want to see out of the winners here.
So I say it's cold tea because looking at Utah and Phoenix almost all season, they've been basically the top of the West for a good 3-4 months. And so I don't think they would really have any preference for who they want to play because of how well they've been playing down the stretch. Now, I will say that to Phoenix's perspective right now, I don't think that with a healthy Lakers team, I don't know if they can beat them in a 7-game series. It remains to be seen because I want to see exactly how Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, how they're going to perform, because this is going to be their first run of the playoffs, along with DeAndre Ayton and Booker. This is going to be their first true test in a real playoff setting. Chris Paul has been there. Jay Crowder has been there, so they know, so you can lean on them for experience. But you're going up against a 2-headed monster who's looking for blood right now. So as far as them picking their opponents, I honestly don't think they would prefer it that way. Because what they're saying is that we've been the top 2 in the West all year. Why would we be afraid or duck from anybody or even try to pick our opponent? Like, we like what we have here. Bring on all comers.
Well, and it's interesting too because it would only be a this year conundrum, right? Because what's happened to Lakers this year is unique. You don't typically have a defending champ, Vegas favorite to win it all at the start of the season, etc., through injury play their way down to a potential 7 or 8 seed, right? Like that doesn't normally happen over the course of 82 games, but it did happen in LA this year. And so I could see how if you're Phoenix or Utah, you're sitting here like, man, we worked our tails off all year long. right? Like all year. And they played great home court record, whether it's the mountain time zone trip, whatever, like something helped them out, right?
Oh, yeah.
And for winning all those games, you now get LeBron and Anthony Davis. Like, I get why that doesn't seem fair this year, right? However, that's just a this year problem. And frankly, it might be the high school coach in me. Part of me thinks if you're going to win it all, you got to beat them anyway, right?
Exactly.
In a normal bracket, it might have been the Western Conference Finals, but you're going to have to beat them to win it all, right? And so that's like when people used to give me crap about the Rockets losing the Warriors in the second round. It's like, yeah, but they would also have beaten the Blazers in the next round. It's just more about like whenever we play the Warriors, it's going to be a bad time, right? Or if you were the Spurs from a few years back, and they were dominating the Western Conference, you were just going to run into the Spurs at some point, right? Like, it didn't really matter when that was. You were going to have to play San Antonio. Meanwhile, I should point out, they just called a timeout. It is a 4-point game still midway through the third quarter in that one. I do think it's interesting if we look at the Western Conference play-in, as much as I anticipated a Russell Westbrook or LaMelo Ball moment last night, I feel like I even more look forward to a potential Steph Curry one tonight, don't you?
Yes, I agree. I think this is really a chance for Steph Curry to show that even though there's no Klay Thompson, there's no really real dominant help for Golden State this time around. I think this is the time for him to really put his imprint as far as his I think it could be a legacy game for him going up against LeBron and AD. I think it will be.
And the wild thing, I was going to say silly because it's kind of silly, but a legacy game is that if you look at tonight's game, if LeBron wins, the folks that put LeBron higher than Steph all time will always cite this, like, when Steph had no help, look what happened, and when LeBron had no help, right? They'll do something there. If Steph wins, LeBron is Stan. We'll never hear the end of it, right? Like, that's just how that's going to go. And what's silly to me is even if Steph Curry gets 65 and they win tonight, like just nuts. In a 7-game series, if Davis and LeBron are healthy, I don't think we pick the Warriors. And in a 7-game series against Phoenix or Utah, with how many injuries, like with Klay Thompson and so on, that the Warriors have, I'm not picking them either. Like, the 1-game sample of this seems to kind of throw it out of whack, right?
Oh, yeah, without question. But honestly, it adds to the intrigue. It adds to the drama, which is the playoffs. And I think that us as fans, that's what we want to see. When it comes to a 1-game playoff, how much effort are both teams going to put into it? Because even if you lose the game, you still have a chance to make up for it a couple nights later. So it just adds to the drama that is the playoffs.
And I heard it. So tonight's game's been really hyped up, right? Between LeBron and Steph, it was like I heard people talking about like it's for all the marbles. And then someone pretty quickly pointed out on the radio, like, actually, they could play tonight and then theoretically meet again in the Western Conference Finals. Like, it's not even tonight. It's not even like the end of them playing potentially, which is just wild to think about. I don't think the reality of a 7 seed playing an 8 seed in the Western Conference Finals is super high. But I guess if you're going to pick 2 guys to do it, it would be LeBron and Steph Curry. I don't know your age. In 99 and 90, when the Knicks went from the 8 seed to the NBA Finals, I was really young. I got to be honest. The little bit of finals basketball I was watching that year, I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to the New York Knicks. To me, they were just the team with big, ugly Ewing, right? Like, I didn't know a lot about them. But that would be the last time anything like what LeBron is attempting to do, going from a 7 seed to the NBA Finals. That'd be the last time that even happened, much less win the finals. Do you think that that's something they realistically are about to do, or is it just too hard to do?
Well, to me, it's all going to depend on that first round matchup. So if they end up getting Utah, who I think could give them, the biggest problems. But the one caveat to that, I wonder how healthy is Donovan Mitchell, because if he's less than 90, I give the edge to the Lakers. But if they go against Phoenix, I think that the Lakers will probably have a little bit more of their hands full, because I think the point guard matchup between Chris Paul and Dennis Schroeder, I think, just might decide that series.
Well, and it's really like, can Schroeder be good enough, right? He doesn't have to. He has to be good enough. And the shame, that comes back to the age thing you mentioned earlier, right? Where the Suns they have Chris Paul, they got Monty Williams. Those guys are vets. they're just so young. Even like Dario Saric does not have a lot of playoff experience, right? I love what Saric brings them off the bench as a small ball big, but there's just not a lot of experience there. And jumping to some off the floor news, I want to jump into hot tea, cold brew about some front office work. Today seems to be the time of year every year where we're going to talk about Masai Ujiri potentially leaving Toronto. Shout out to Jade Johnson and We the North Nation, literally nation, the entire country of Canada. My question to you is hot tea, cold brew. Is Masai Ujiri really about to or ever going to leave Toronto?
I think he eventually will. I think this is hot tea. I mean, the turnaround that he's had in Toronto is just absolutely amazing because when you think about Toronto as how it started out, as we Vince Sanity coming through, him and Tracy McGrady, then you had Chris Bosh there for a short time, and then you had Toronto kind of in the flux a little bit until Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan came through. Toronto really wasn't a big basketball hotbed, and then you bring him in to really change the culture and how we look at Jurassic Park as a whole, and really Canada as far as a basketball town and country now. I think it's amazing with the job he's done, and to bring a title there after he made the almost unthinkable trade for Kawhi Leonard and for basically Toronto's given son. I didn't think that would ever happen, but hey, here they are. So do I expect them to move? I think it probably within, if not this year, then definitely next year. The question is, where would he land? Because I'm pretty sure there's about 28 to 29 franchises who will give up what they need to get to have him on their side.
Yeah, and he's a very, very talented evaluator. And so since he took over his first year, so just a couple months after getting the job, they were 34-48. They'd won 48 or more games, including in the bubble-shortened season last year, every year until this year when they went 27-45. He really did build a powerhouse, is the wrong word, I think, because they're not a dynastic, multi-titled team, but one of the best teams in the East the entire time he was there until this year. His career, though, with as great as that run has been, it's exactly like you pointed out, is entirely defined by he took the big gamble on the 1-year rental of Kawhi. They had the one shot that bounced around about a bajillion times in the semifinal, in the Eastern Conference semifinal, to beat Philly, and so the gamble paid off, right? Like the cojones to get that done is something that will define his career forever. And I think the deal is like everyone wants a gambler as their person in charge because they want, like, fans want to say, like, we're gonna fight every year and da-da-da. But you really want a gambler that makes his own luck, right? Like that goes after and says, I'm going to go get that guy. And that will, you can argue with We the North Twitter, and I've done it, about like whether or not the team was a culture thing or a Kawhi Leonard thing or what the deal was. But Masai built both. So, right, he gets credit no matter how you split that thing up. I have to say, I have trouble seeing him somewhere else, but I think he's the kind of guy that wants the challenge. Where could you see him heading to if he were to leave Toronto?
Ooh, tough question. So if I had to take maybe a couple of teams that could probably use him, I would not be surprised if Orlando comes calling. I would not be surprised if Houston calls.
Yeah, we could use the help. And I like Raphael Stone. I don't mean like I'm getting rid of folks. We could all use that kind of help. Yeah. I wonder if so he's an international player, right? And he's got that kind of experience. He's done a great job with international players in Denver and then now in Toronto. I wonder if a team that values that kind of stuff like Dallas loves European players, right?
Yes, they do.
And we could break down on a later podcast about the code words they use in talking about European players. But Dallas loves international guys, right? Frankly, the Bay Area, Golden State, loves a good international big man, right? I wonder if he could end up in Dallas because it'd be some way to like sell Luka on like, look, we're working to get better, right? We're pulling in Masai. Frankly, if Dallas doesn't do very well this year, they may clean house with Carlisle and stuff like that too, because there was rumors early in the year about Carlisle and Luka gelling. That was back when they weren't winning, and so now they're winning. Maybe there aren't those rumors anymore. But I just wonder if that's a good fit. I don't say that because I have heard of anything specific, but that would be intriguing to me. Jumping into the next thing, again, an off-the-court issue, but not necessarily with anyone who's been involved in basketball very recently. And I really want to hear your take on this, because I know I've watched the videos. I'm like, huh? And I just hadn't thought of this name in a long time. But hot tea or cold brew, Kwame Brown has a point about stopping with the jokes at the expense of his name. Now, for the folks at home watching that haven't heard this yet, once you're done listening to this episode, go check out. He specifically in his Instagram Live, and it's been shared a bunch of places since, called out the All the Smoke podcast, which is hosted by Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes, two former NBA players, for them joking about him being the biggest bust ever or something like that. Right. And he then proceeded to later also call out Gilbert Arenas. And I got to be really honest. I think Kwame Brown might be the bravest person on the planet, because I've seen Steven Jackson punch fans with his own hands. There's the stories of Matt Barnes paying to fly across the country in the middle of the night to challenge some dude who called him out on Twitter. And Gilbert Arenas literally had guns in the locker room. Like, those are three dudes that I ain't trying, and he is. And so he thinks he's got a point, because that's the only way you'd go about this, right? But hot tea, cold brew, Kwame Brown has a point about stopping with the jokes at the expense of his name.
So this is one of the more craziest. I actually could not believe this when it first came out, because I can't even remember the last time I even heard Kwame Brown's name. I'll be very honest with you. But to hear all this come out now, and then the names who have been calling him out, you can throw Stephen A. Smith in there too.
Yeah.
So, I think it's unfortunate that he turned out to be a bust throughout his career. I mean, it's the God honest truth. But at the same time, like, his career has long been over. Like, I want to say at least a few years, maybe longer. Like, it to me, it's just I don't think you need to go that route, honestly, because there have been other number one busts throughout, not just the NBA, but in sports as well, who have had similar bad luck. So I honestly think it was maybe a little bit out of line, but I won't sit here and lie and say it's not entertaining.
It's been really entertaining. So, quick summary of his career. He was in the league for what is technically 9 years. The last 3 seasons, he played less than 30 games a season, but he was in the league for, that's 3 contracts. And I guess with the short seasons, that's actually probably more. But he was getting about 20 minutes a game, and he averaged 6 points and almost 6 rebounds a game, which, had he not been taken number 1 overall, probably isn't a bust, right? Like, that's multiple contracts. That's okay. The deal is that Michael Jordan, who at the time we had no reason to think was not a good owner, manager, etc., took him number 1 overall out of high school. So we all assumed that potential was sky high, and for all we know, it really might have been, I guess. But he sure didn't get there. I'm not trying him though. So if this gets to Kwame Brown, great basketball player, 0 complaints. Clearly, you're very, very real. I just think that it's interesting that, and the joke of the whole thing was, he's calling out All the Smoke podcast because they want all the smoke, and he called them by name. He said maybe it should be called Some of the Smoke podcast. And I about died.
Stop the music.
Because the truth is, it's like, what do Matt Barnes or Steven Jackson stand to benefit from cracking a Kwame Brown joke 20 years later?
Right. I mean, I honestly don't understand it, but like I said, it's some of it is just real. It's playful fun for the most part, but then sometimes lines do get crossed or stepped over. So sometimes you just gotta let it go. But apparently, it hasn't gotten that way.
I gotta say, if he really does end up on an episode of All the Smoke podcast, they got to bring Gilbert Arenas in just to make it a whole party. I just want to see it play out. I want to see it play out. So that's it for Hot Tea Cold Brew. We're moving right along. Open container tonight is actually going to be focused on the women's side of things. Open container is based on the idea that once you pop the top off of your Yeti, anything can go in or out. That's hot liquid, cold liquid, ice, anything. So an open container question is, in the opening weekend of the WNBA last weekend, right? We had a great buzzer beater on opening night from Sabrina on national television. The Storm scared the pants off the whole league the next day by racking in a bunch of threes. Sabrina's already since, in her, I believe it was the second game of the season, had only the 9th triple-double in the history of the league. We're seeing some fun stuff in the WNBA. So my open container question to you is, what have you made about, or what did you learn from the opening weekend of WNBA basketball, Jamaal?
The main thing I learned is basketball is life. No matter how you may spin it, I don't care if it's college, I don't care if it's the pros, I don't care if it's the WNBA. These women, they got game. And one of the main things I saw, other than the game winner and then the Seattle Storm, who just looked like who may be untouchable right now, I gotta look at Chicago and Candace Parker's debut when she went back home. I think she may make the Sky a very valued opponent coming in. And honestly, I think they might challenge to get to the NBA Finals. I think they might beat the Storm.
So I got to be honest. When I saw the Storm, I believe it was on ABC on Saturday, and I was like kind of geeked up. I was like, the WNBA is on national like basic cable television. This is a big deal for the league. I turned on. I was like, these two teams don't feel like they're in the same league. And that's the Las Vegas Aces, right? Like multiple all-stars. That's a really good team.
Who were in the finals last year.
Right. I just felt like the Storm's in a different league. And that's not to like take too many shots at the Aces or anyone else, because frankly, the Storm lost their second game. They're sitting here at 1-1. But when Sue Bird is on and Breanna Stewart's on and Jewel Lloyd is on, and they're clicking, they can all shoot, they can all drive, they can all pass. I don't know how you slow them down on offense. The game they lost was a high-scoring game.
I don't know how you contain them.
I'm intrigued by, so the big name is always going to be Sabrina. She's young, she's fun. We saw her at Oregon, triple-double, so on. Buzzer beater. That's 2 big games so far already. I wonder, did you watch any of the, and this would have been harder, you had to look for them, any of the non-nationally televised games, like Wings Sparks or anyone like, I guess you said you watched the Chicago game a little bit?
Yeah, I was really interested in seeing how Candace Parker was going to do in her debut, because I honestly did not know what to expect. It was a new environment for her. But now she's really stepped into this new leadership role with a new team. I think she's taking what she's learned from Lisa Leslie from all those years ago and applying it here. Now, as far as the other games are concerned, I haven't really been able to tune in too much, but I do want to give a quick shout out to Simone Augustus, who had retired not too long ago. Just took too much toll over her body. But I tell you what, that was one of the more special players in the league that I've seen play.
Well, and I think the thing about Simone Augustus that was interesting was, so we all, or at least I remember watching her as far back as LSU, right? Like she had like the women's tournament started being really well covered on national television around the time she was at LSU, and they were really good because she was really good. She's got to be a Hall of Famer in a few years when she's eligible.
No question.
Right? I thought it was cool to see, because the league is just 25 years old this year. That's right. The big WNBA XX and then 5 tallies is because it's 25 years old. And we're seeing a generation of women playing WNBA basketball that does not know a world without it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like theoretically, like that makes sense that would be a big league. It's a good year. It's a good year to watch basketball and so on. It's a great summer league. Clearly, with the deference they all had to Simone Augustus, that's exactly what's happening, right? Like WNBA players are taking time out of their press conferences, taking time on their social media, et cetera, to like bow down to Simone Augustus, who, as fun as she was not Diana Taurasi, right? Like was not like GOAT conversation, was just like very, very good champion here, champion, but like not like Michael Jordan of women's basketball, right? Like, and all these young women were sitting there saying, oh, I love watching her play when I was growing up. And it's like, oh, that this league is working, right? We've got women in their 20s that are reminiscing about watching this other woman play basketball. Like the league is working. And I took that as a really good sign for the league in the future, right? That means there's some 10-year-old girl that saw Sabrina Ionescu on Friday night hit a buzzer beater, right? Like those kinds of things can keep the ball rolling with this. Anyway, that's my soapbox on that. What did when you watched you said you watched some Chicago. I felt like Candace Parker and Diamond DeShields are still working out their on-court chemistry as far as like when to pick their spots because they could both dominate a game. I liked Kalia Cooper. I didn't know that she was going to have it like that, if I'm being real honest. And so that was my takeaway on that. Are you looking for? Is there a matchup now? You've seen a weekend of it. Is there a matchup you're looking forward to in the coming weekends?
Man, if I definitely want to see definitely Chicago, Seattle. That's one I definitely want to see. Probably another one I want to see New York versus. I want to see New York, Seattle as well. I want to see how Sabrina does against probably the consensus top team in the in WNBA. How she is going to respond to some of those, basically the Goliaths right now in the game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's part of me that wants to like say something with Phoenix because when I started watching women's basketball, that's Skylar Diggins, Brittany Griner, Diana Taurasi. Like those are women whose names I enjoyed watching for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is they're playing together and it's fun. But unless Diana's going off for 35, that's just kind of a team that's a little past their primes and it's like a sum of their parts thing. I think you're right that Seattle's kind of that measuring stick right now. And we'll see. Sneakerhead Snoop. Obviously, I like shoes myself. Sneakerhead Sue Bird is always going to have a good vote in my book.
Also, quick shout out to Cynthia Cooper and Cheryl Swoops. Those were the names I loved growing up.
Good old Houston Comets. You're not going to get any hate out of me. I got a Tina Thompson bobblehead right here. Like we're all on the same page.
That's living legend right
now. All right, so we're going to jump into a segment called the Long Two. Again, this is called the Midweek Mid-Range. So we will do a long two each week. The mid-range jump shot is a long two-pointer, right? It's hated by some people that like analytics because it seems to be silly. Like you just take a step backward and you get 150% of the points. Why would you take a long two? So that's what we're going to do is take a long two. My question to you, Jamaal, is what are two things you're looking forward to as the NBA playoffs, not play-in, but playoffs start this weekend?
So I'm looking forward to seeing how Milwaukee is going to come out against the team that knocked him out last year in Miami. I want to see how Giannis is going to move his game forward because, as I said, the one way for him to elevate his game is for him to either do one or two things, post up more or really use that mid-range jump shot because besides maybe Bam Adebayo, I don't really see anybody on Miami who can really challenge him in the post. That's where I want to see him. I think that's where he can have the most success. And then for as far as the second thing is, for a good number of these teams, it's going to be make or break seasons. So I'm looking at Portland. I'm looking at Philly. I'm looking at, of course, Brooklyn. Who else? I would look at Dallas as well. These are teams who I'm saying that they've had their chances in the past. They have not capitalized on them. And matter of fact, I'll throw Utah in there too, because I want to see how Coach Snyder is going to be in these playoffs because he's been criticized in the past for not making adjustments, especially last year when Murray went off on him and he did not do anything to stop him. So those are the main teams I want to see. How do they adjust when things get tough or if they somehow get down in a series or face elimination? Because people respond different to pressure.
Yeah, and I also think it's interesting to watch. You brought up Milwaukee, and that's one of the two things I want to watch too is what they do from game to game. And the shame there is it actually will probably take longer than this weekend to get a picture for that. But the big, the buzz on Bud is that in a playoff series, he has a great game plan game one. And once you figure that out, he takes too much time to scramble to come back. So the counter punch is kind of what he lacked in Atlanta and what he's lacked in Milwaukee. And why I'm intrigued by it is not only do they have Giannis, not only do they have Drew, not only do they add PJ Tucker so they can go small, right? Mm-hmm. What I'm intrigued by is for the start of the year, it really genuinely felt like they were experimenting throughout the regular season, whether by choice or not, because like Drew's out for a little bit of time here, Giannis needs a little bit of a break there and those kind of things. And I am hoping, for the sake of watching Giannis play basketball more, that they continue to carry those experiments into, well, we know this worked then. Let's try that in game 2. Oh, they gave us this. Now let's do that based on what happened in February.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just been something Bud's never done very well with. And so I'm intrigued to see if that works out for him. I could say the same thing about Quinn Snyder in Utah. I didn't see as much experimenting from them. The biggest thing for them, it looked like to me, was Ingles and Bogey and Clarkson were clearly healthy all year long. And they were not in the bubble, right? Bogey stayed home, and Ingles was not feeling great or what in the bubble, and so that hurt a little bit. I just didn't quite see the experimentation out of them that I saw earlier in the year, as far as like sometimes Milwaukee played drop for a whole game. Sometimes they'd play up level with the guys coming off the screen. Sometimes they'd vary it. They played small with PJ in the corner as the small ball big man and let Giannis bring the ball up. Sometimes they played like PJ at the 3, Giannis at the 4, Lopez at the 5, and that's a huge lineup, right? Especially when then you put Middleton at the 2, like that gets real big real fast.
Oh yeah.
So that's one thing, is seeing if Bud can make those adjustments, and I guess technically if Snyder does too. My second thing goes to what you said back in Hot Tea and Cold Brew. I want to see how this young Phoenix team rolls, man, because I don't have evidence that they choke, right? Like I have no evidence.
I don't either.
I have no evidence that they would choke. I do know that it was a play. It was one of the 8 like round robin type games, so it was not a playoff game. But Booker can play. Like we saw Booker hit that shot against Kawhi, right? Like Booker can do this, and I guess that's something I'm looking for, because, frankly, it behoove the league to see Booker have a real chance, because if he can't do it in Phoenix with Paul and Monty, the small market thing may really not work, right?
It may not, and it's going to be real incompetent on him to start off the series, whoever they play. He has to get off to a great start, because I think if he does that, once again, you have Chris Paul to lean on, but he has to start off the series like right from the get-go.
You mentioned early in the year, and correct me if I'm wrong, your big thing with Phoenix was adding Chris Paul, adding Monty Williams, right? And you were hot on Monty much earlier than I was, and so I want to give you your credit there. I maintain that we've seen this blueprint from Chris Paul, and this was my take on it. I didn't have them being a 2 seed in the West, right? I did not see that. I didn't see them being that good. I did think, though, that based on this blueprint, they could be good. And by looking at the blueprint, I mean that they've got Chris Paul, they've got an efficient scoring 2 guard, they've got 3-4 positional guys that can play defense and shoot threes, and they've got a rim running guy at big. And in 2018, when Chris Paul was a hamstring away in Houston, they had Chris Paul. They had a highly efficient scoring 2 guard. They had a bunch of switchable guys at 3s and 4s that can shoot threes and play defense. And they had a rim running big. Now, is Devin Booker MVP James Harden? Are McCall Bridges and Dario Saric and Jay Crowder, are those guys PJ Tucker, Trevor Ariza, Wnba Mute? Is DeAndre Ayton, Clint Capella? Like those are the comparisons, but like the structure fits the same kind of game plan. And that, call me biased, was a hamstring away from being even better than when it was, right? Yeah. I think they got a chance. I don't know that they'll choke. I don't know what they'll do. I'm interested to see what Devin Booker's built for. It's interesting when those guys all came out of Kentucky. I thought the guy that was going to get this shot first was Karl Anthony Towns, right? Like they were an 8 seed in his second or third year. Like that felt like a done deal, right?
Yeah, for the most part. And out of that group, I mean, you think about it. I mean, of course, Booker, Towns. I think Murray. I think maybe I'm wrong. I think Murray was with them too. So you have all these guys out of Kentucky who were great individually or whatnot. But what can they bring to their new teams? And I think out of those guys, Murray has really had the upper hand as far as playoff success to this point. Now like everybody else, I want to see what Devin Booker does when the lights are on. So he wanted this opportunity. He's got it.
Well, and so in that draft, you had Towns went 1. As I scroll down, you had Cauley Stein went 6, also Kentucky guy. Trey Lyles went 12th. And as I keep going, I missed one. Anyway, there were several guys in that class. That was the year Kentucky had like 7 guys declare at once, right? That was nuts. Shout out Big Blue Nation. My co-host on my other show will appreciate that. I just think it's interesting that as we sit here, the guy with the shot here to really take it to the next level is Devin Booker, and he gets picked 13th right after a couple of those other guys. And it's not that anyone thought he couldn't play. It's just that it's funny to me that that's shaping out to be him getting the next chance. Oh, the other guy, the Harrison twins, one gets drafted in the second round. Good college players, and frankly, I think they're still in the league. I just don't know. I know Andrew, I think, is still in the league. I don't know how they're faring, I guess, right now. Anyway, shout out to Booker and those guys. That's another thing I want to watch. I only have some stuff I've read. I hadn't written in over a week for Wednesday Night Rights. Have you been reading or writing anything interesting, Jamaal?
So not at the moment, but I really, like, as far as rights goes, I definitely want to see how this year's playoffs is going to stack up to ones in the past, because this is a very unique situation that we're all having here. So as far as the play-in, how the top 2 seeds in each conference, how they have to prepare for who they might or might not face. It's different. It's brand new, but honestly, to me, it's exciting. And I hope that the league will stay with it, because I think it will force teams who are still in the playoff picture for years to come to stay with it. Because you never know. You may get a bouncer call or two coming your way. You just never know.
Yeah, I think what I wrote last week was a deal about the play-in shaping out to be one of Adam Silver's best ideas, because the longevity of it. Like, the bubble wasn't longevity because it was a 1-year thing. Hopefully, knock on wood, right? The Donald Sterling thing was like, that was a no-brainer, and it was a one-time thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that the play-in tournament of sorts could last a long time certainly gave it more weight to me. My Wednesday Night Rights, if I hadn't written anything since that last week, although my Rockets thing for the week is almost done, is I want to encourage everyone to read Kate Fagan's book. Kate Fagan was a basketball writer, played basketball at Colorado a long time ago. Not to age her, I guess, but played basketball at Colorado a long time ago. And she took some time off to be with her dad, who had ALS. And then she wrote a whole book, and I'm only, 40 pages in, but basically it's about reminiscing about life with her dad in the last couple, years and months with her dad. And like, it's all, as a basketball show, it's all basketball lessons, right? Like, keep your shoes in the car. You don't know when the game's going to show up, right? And taking a basketball metaphor, like, I got hoop shoes in my car right now, and they're about 6 years old, but they're in there. Like, and it's taking those metaphors and rolling with them into bigger picture things, and also hearing a lot about her conversations with her dad. And it, I'm like I said, about 40 pages in. It's been a strong read, and as a teacher about to go on summer break, it probably is something that I'm going to spend a lot of time at the start of the summer on. To decompress a little bit. And so that's something I'm reading. I also would recommend reading McMahon, who's an ESPN writer, as far as like covering front office stuff. If you're looking at what's going on with Masai Ujiri, we talked about earlier. And then the funny thing is, if you are listening to this and you've got people to read as far as like insight on the Kwame Brown thing, Joel Anderson for Slate wrote a whole bit about him before all of this happened and had some good insight there. But I would like to know if you've got comments or anything for people who are writing about guys like Kwame Brown that I hadn't thought of in a long time. I would appreciate that. All right. The star of the show here as we jump into the buzzer beater. So the buzzer beater, for those of you new to the show, is when you've got 24 seconds, or the length of an NBA shot clock, to get off a take. And frankly, I'm a little intimidated because before we even got on, Jamaal goes, "I've got my buzzer beater." And Jamaal is, for those of you new to the show, really, really good at these. Like, he is always timely. He's always right before it clips, and it's always off, and it's always money. And I'm really not. If you haven't been able to tell by how much I talk thus far, I'm really long-winded, and the 24 seconds is just really confining. And so, with that said, Jamaal, I take it you're ready because you told me you were really prepared.
Yes, this one. So most of the other ones that you've seen, like the past episodes, they just came like split in the head. This one I actually had time to actually look at today.
I don't know if that makes it more or less intimidating. Anyway, all right. I'm going to count you down, and then I'm going to turn the clock to you, okay?
All right.
3, 2, 1, go.
So I want to say congratulations once again to Kevin Garnett, who made the Hall of Fame last weekend. And also it's his 45th birthday today on May 19th. Also on this day in May 19th, 2004, he had one of the biggest games of his career against the Sacramento Kings, where he scored 30-plus points and grabbed 20-plus rebounds, one of the few games in NBA playoff history to do so. And they won Game 7 in that series to go on to their first Western Conference final.
I'm telling you, it's always money. I can't. I don't know how I'll ever. I can't do it. Always money. All right. Shout out to Kevin Garnett. What'd you think of the NBA Hall of Fame stuff over the weekend?
And you talk about one of the greatest draft classes that I probably have ever seen in my lifetime. You're talking about Kevin Garnett, Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, who basically all came into the league around the same time. So it was KG first, 95 actually.
Yes.
Yeah, 95.
Kobe's 96.
A year later, and then Duncan in 97. And then to have basically all their careers kind of intertwined with each other for all those years, and they've all had great success. But then you also don't want to leave out Tamika Catchings, one of the great players in the Indiana Fever history. Rudy Tomjanovich, back-to-back world titles with Houston. And then Bill Russell as a coach. I mean, yeah. I can't think of another. Oh, I don't want to forget Rick Alleman as well from Sacramento and the Portland days as well. If you don't know Portland basketball with Drexler and those boys, watch. So I have to say it was one of the most fun, really interactive Hall of Fame stuff that I've seen in a long time. And also shout out to Michael Wilbon and Mike Brayton as well, who also made the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, Jamaal. Again, I don't want to throw your age out there, but it's getting to be guys that I watched their whole careers of, right? Like we joked about the 99 finals earlier, but that's like a big Timmy coming out party, right? He wins finals MVP as a second-year guy. And now he's a Hall of Famer. And that's weird. We're going to see guys we watched play, like start their careers or now finish their careers in the Hall of Fame. I also think it's interesting. So we had Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett. To keep up with the more traditional timeline, they've already announced the next set, which will be Chris Webber. It's more people in this, but Chris Webber, Ben Wallace, and Chris Bosh. Yes. And that fivesome has to be as good a fivesome of power forwards as there's ever been in a span, right? Like the way that that encapsulates the power forward for late 90s and 2000s basketball. Like that generation of power forwards is just tremendous.
No question.
I was a big Bosch guy. And then as a Rockets guy, I had a lot of respect for Timmy, but he broke our hearts a lot. I think I tweeted over the weekend that he beat my team for 20 damn years, and he had me teary-eyed watching him talk about Popovich. Like, what the hell is wrong with me? God, it was good. It was a good time. It was a good speech. All right. I am not quite as good at these, so I'm going to start. All right. 3, 2, 1. Today, Tim McMahon reported that Houston Rockets announced Gretchen Shear's promotion to president of basketball operations. She's the fourth woman to be in that role in the NBA at the Houston Rockets. That also means they have Raphael Stone, they have Steven Silas, and now with Gretchen Shear, that has to be one of, if not the most diverse front offices and decision makers in the NBA, which is way more than I expected from Tillman Fertitta. And I'll leave it at that.
Hey,
I was about to start something else. I was like, no, I'm not going to start something else.
But seriously, shout out to Houston because they're doing it right.
Well, and I just hope it all works, right? Because clearly it didn't lead to a lot of wins this year. But I hope it means they're on the right track for a lot of reasons. But I hope it means that they're on the right track. Jamaal, we're wrapping up early. It's just two of us tonight. That means the show goes a little bit faster. But tell us where people can find you.
So the tag you see below that's on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram as well. As you know, I'm pretty much a staple now in the mid-range right now. So this is, if you want to see me on podcasts, this is where I'm
at. For sure. And then I think you're on again next week, right? My name is Parker Ainsworth. You can see the handle down below is at Painsworth512. That's at PAINSWORTH 512. All one word on Twitter and Instagram, also on Facebook if you want to look me up there. But I also do a show that comes out on Mondays. It's audio only. It's called FN Sports. It's another teacher and we break down sports topics by grading them. And then I write for Belly Up, even though I've been really busy wrapping up school the last week. I usually write 2 or 3 things a week, and you can find those at bellyupsports.com, usually about basketball, sometimes about football, and even more rarely about guys like Mike Golick Sr. or something weird. But anyway, thank you all for coming by. It's always a great time at midweek, mid-range. And remember, don't be afraid to pull up. Thanks, guys.